are so many people out there who want to volunteer and find a way in which they can help.
We've got some brilliant people that have come out of the school system here in Attleboro.
You actually perform as an elected official the way people should.
There are no agendas. Nobody has any projects that they have to complete, but we're just sharing information.
Good evening, and welcome to People It's Good to Know. This evening, we have a woman who's going to be a candidate for City Council this fall. She's someone who is relatively new to our community, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity for people to get to know Pamela. This is Pamela Braman. Pamela, thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank you for having me, John.
It's always great when we have the opportunity to have political candidates on to allow the public to, learn a little bit more about them and their story and their background and, what they hope to do. And now you're someone who I don't really know all that well. A lot of the people that I interview are people that I have a long history with. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got here from...
I'm really a Massachusetts baby. I lived there for decades until I got divorced, and I moved to Rhode Island a few years later after I sold my house in Foxborough. I spent 20 years in Rhode Island. But what's most significant about me, about where I am and where I've been, is that I've always had an interest in local politics and national politics. It's just like it's a deep interest, not a fanaticism quite, but I really follow and I really get passionate about it. When I lived in Rhode Island, I was involved in politics there. I served on an appointed board, the Pawtucket Water Supply Board, for 6.5 years.
Which is a mighty important role in Pawtucket. I mean, water.
It is. It's a pretty somewhat powerful board. We had our own lawyer. We had our own, the city business manager was one of our ex officio members. It's something that the mayor kept a close eye on because it did have a lot of power and whatever. But, and many years before that, when I lived in Foxborough, I was a member of what they call the advisory committee, and I was an alternate planning board member for a while. I sit in on some meetings to plan Patriots Place before it was built. So that's a while ago. But it gave me a planning perspective that I find that sometimes comes to my mind when I'm hearing people talk about developments. That the planning background comes through, and I form a certain opinion that other people might not, because they may not have that planning background.
Exactly. I served several years on the planning board and on the regional planning authority, and I found that experience later on as a counselor paid off. That planning mindset, and it also lays the groundwork for thinking long term, because a lot of these developments are long-term projects.
Yes.
So you moved to Attleboro 3 or 4 years ago?
A little over 2 years.
Oh, okay.
I've been trying to move out of Rhode Island for quite a while, and I was so happy I had the opportunity. I got an offer for housing, and I just jumped at it, and I'm so glad to be back in Massachusetts.
Attleboro is certainly a great place. There's certainly a lot of people who are happy to come here, and we're happy to have you. So you've decided that this fall you're going to run the City Council at-large race. Was that a tough decision for you to make, or what was it that motivated you to decide, okay, I'm going to give this a shot?
I ran for office in Rhode Island, was not successful. But the same passion I found out after I moved to Attleboro and started to watch the cable meetings, which were very helpful. I got interested in and passionate about what was going on in Attleboro, and it was a good place to start to do a lot of homework. So for all those months I was watching the meetings, I was saying, I want to run for City Council in Attleboro. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it at the next election. When I had just moved here, they were just the beginning of the election cycle, but I said, I just don't know enough about this city to to try and help, to try and be an asset to them at this point. So
Right. It's really great that we do have all the meetings televised so that people can, without leaving their home, be able to watch every week.
Yeah.
When I first got involved in politics 30 years ago, most of the people who were interested came every week to the meeting and sat there for hours and hours.
Yeah.
Now it's even though in those days you could still watch it on TV,
Yes.
most people who were interested opted to come in person.
it was like that Metucket. I probably shouldn't be bringing it up, but they have a huge old, gracious building, the City Hall Council chambers, that people would go to. It was an auditorium and a half, and that was my experience too. But the cable, if you don't feel well, especially during COVID, we had, if we were interested and wanted to know what was going on, there was only one way to do it. Thank you.
Right.
AACS.
Yep.
People from time to time, I hear jokes about, only a few people watch. The thing is, we have to not diminish that count, we have to add to it.
Absolutely.
We have to promote it. I don't know what kind of promotions you can do to encourage people to watch municipal meetings, but
Right. Well, I think it's important to strive to first educate people and make them understand why it's important to be involved.
Right.
When we were all much younger, there was a generation of people who were far more actively involved in local politics, and I'm convinced that there's going to be a whole nother generation of younger people who are going to be just as motivated as they were. Were there any specific things you saw that made you decide that you want to run at this time? Or?
Again, a lifelong interest in politics. A previous attempt to run in Rhode Island, which was so partisan. You're ready to wring your neck, It's just like you have to be an inner member of the inner sect of the.
Right. And that's an interesting point to make. In Rhode Island, primarily, and in Pawtucket specifically, all elections are partisan, whether it's local, state, and it's a whole different mindset and background. Even though our local politics are becoming more and more partisan, it's a whole different ball game. And I think we have a better system here. I think it's more objective and it doesn't polarize people quite as much. But
when I got here and saw that the parties were not indicated next to the candidate's name on the ballots, I said, "That's great. That's wonderful." It seemed enlightened to me. I will say my opinion has changed a little bit since I've entered the process myself. The ballots may be nonpartisan, the elections are not. Again, we have at least two major parties in this country, and that's normal to have people choose a party and run for that party and, collaborate, join themselves with that party and the beliefs of that party. I'm not offended by that, but because of the nonpartisan label that we try to give to Attleboro politics, I'm finding that people keep the party activities on the QT, and I find that harder to deal with than not knowing.
Well, that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point. As I've been a member during my lifetime of both parties at one time or another. I'm about as close to the middle of the road moderate person as you get, and I found that really the same thing you found is that behind the scenes, a lot of stuff really is partisan, and it's because the people who get most involved are the people who have those really strong feelings. I think there are a lot of people who are more middle of the road people who just don't get as actively involved, even though all these decisions affect them just as much. So are there any issues that have excited you or that you found really interesting that's been talked about?
Because I'm an older person, I'm interested in the Council on Aging, the siting of the new center. We're at a very interesting and volatile point in that process. I've been, watching. You were at the last council meeting too.
I was going to say, you were at the building commission meeting a few weeks ago. I didn't get a chance to speak to you that evening, but I thought I saw you there in the crowd.
There's a lot going on at that meeting. Some of it I understood, some of it I didn't. Some of it I agreed with, some I didn't. But I'm interested to see how the process goes forward. I hope they don't concentrate only on one site at this point, because it's so early in the process. We should keep our ear to the ground on what's going on with the other possible sites. We should definitely think twice about putting a second-story senior center on any lot, because there are some indications that's not the advisable thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, as I always say, the devil's in the details, and there are a lot of details to be worked out. What makes me happy is that after years and years of talking about this, that we're finally actually in the planning phase, and that's the part I enjoy about government, and it sounds to me like it is with you too, is working out all the details to make something that's going to last for years and years to come, because everyone knows whatever we build today is going to greatly outlive you and I. The seniors of Attleboro are still going to be using it long after we're gone, and you have to really think ahead.
Yeah, I think that all the time when people make that quick statement, this process is going to take at least 5 years or more. Well, for a senior citizen, not all of us, but for some of us, you're talking about a lifetime. So even though we realize the process is going to take years, let's be a little careful about how we throw that in people's faces, because it can be. It can be something that upsets you rather than invigorates you to action.
Well, I've encountered a lot of people. In my last political campaign, I encountered a lot of people who were quite frustrated that it had taken this long to get to the planning process.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone has been in agreement for years that the senior center we have today was inadequate.
Yeah.
It's been inadequate for 20 years.
And I've been living in Attleboro only a few months and drove through the center of town and knew a little bit about the inadequacies of the present center. I just drove by and looked at it, looked for parking. I tried to get in the building once and went through that. Where do I park? Can I cross the street? It just hit me in the face. Why would somebody think this was the proper site for a senior center ever? You know, but definitely, like you said, for it to go on for so long. Unfortunately, the city has put off making some large infrastructure expenditures for a long time. The police and fire are just about at the same state. So.
There are a number of capital investments that have been kicked down the road for literally for decades at this point. I mean, let's be honest, both the police and fire headquarters, the police was inadequate the day it was opened nearly 40 years ago. And the fire headquarters is well over 100 years old. So we have a long history in Attleboro of putting off capital projects. And again, someone who's interested in being involved in long-term planning sees that and says, okay, at some point, you got to get the ball rolling. It may not get built right away, but you have to start the process, because the process can take years.
You do have to get it rolling, and it will take years. But I hope that the people who are sitting on the feasibility study for the senior center or the feasibility study for the police and fire station remember to keep in the back of their minds that there's another feasibility study going on for another building that's just as important as the one I care about or you care about. That we have to sit down and not only talk about what we need, but what we want, but we have to say, most of the lists that the people compile are things they want. They'll say, I have a need for a certain amount of space, whatever. But other than that, the site where they put it, what they want it to look like, what they want to go inside of it is also a want. And we have to reflect back and say, do I need this? Because somebody else needs something too. And we're going to have to divvy up the pot.
It's a balancing act.
If we don't want to go for a tax increase, we're going to have to divvy up the pot.
Everybody can't have everything. But that doesn't mean that we can't meet all our basic fundamental needs. We just, like you said, got to differentiate between our needs and our wants. And that's one of the things you encounter as a counselor is weighing these different constituencies. Like I said, what project might be super important to me might not be the same project that's super important to you, but they each might have the same value to the community. And it's trying to evaluate how you prioritize and how you distribute the funds. What kind of things are you really hoping to see get done as a counselor? Are there certain things that you'd like to try to sort of shepherd forward or pursue?
There are immediate proposals such as the senior center that, of course, I want to be a part of early on like this. So if I have something to say, I say it at the right time. There are so many things going on with the city council. What I want to do is not just do city council business, not just vote on things, but again, maybe it's from coming from another location into the Attleboro area and getting the first splash of an impression, you know, that kind of holds the truth a lot. I'm looking at change. I read the charter. I also read the charter and the ordinances, and I see lots of things that really need to be updated. Things that need to be changed, or I would like to see changed. I need to learn more about that process. How much can one counselor do to propose a change? How much can one counselor do to gather support for a change, to see, hopefully? So it's the bigger picture too, other than the small picture, what they're doing at that meeting in that one room. I want to see if there are other ways I can propose changes that'll make things better for years to come in the future, to maybe correct some things that are not quite.
And that's one of the interesting aspects you have when you come from where you've lived in other communities for a while, is you see what has worked there and what hasn't worked there, and it brings a fresh set of ideas. You know, there are people like me who have lived in Attleboro all my life, and I may know Attleboro inside and out, but that's what I know, and I might be sort of tunnel vision because that's what I know. So I think what you'll find when you're on the council is so many of the things that get your interest and that you get involved with are things that you never saw coming. You know, those unforeseen things that pop up.
Yeah, I was a newspaper reporter for many years.
I thought so, yeah.
And when my children were young, I worked part-time, but I also worked full-time for many newspapers. I worked from Westerly to New Bedford to Foxborough, Bridgewater. I worked for many papers, and that was where I found that I had the patience, tolerance, and ability to absorb all the details, fine details from these meetings that most people are, you know, well, I've had enough of that, you know.
Right.
I couldn't, you know, I don't care anymore about it, but I do. I care about the details. I remember them, I retain them, and I seem to be able to apply them to different, you know, different subjects. So,
and that's an important point, because some of these meetings that go on tend to be long, and a lot of times some of the key facts and figures happen later in the meeting when a lot of people may have lost interest already and miss out on the most important thing of the evening. So you really enjoyed being a reporter?
Oh, I did. And that was one of the main aspects that I enjoyed. Every day was different. You never knew what was going to happen, where you were going to end up, you know, at an accident scene or at a meeting or at the airport. You never knew, and that was exciting. That was exciting. Definitely not a boring job.
Absolutely. Now, I imagine you've met a fair number of people already in the whole campaign process here along the way. You know, what is your take on the city of Attleboro? How do you see Attleboro as being a little bit different than Pawtucket?
Oh my goodness.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot. It just seems to me, you know, an interesting question.
Well, there are lots of answers to that, but what I'm going to talk about is diversity. I'm not seeing a lot of diverse people in Attleboro. They may be here, but I'm not seeing them. I'm not seeing them on the council. I'm not seeing them at the meetings, and I'm wondering about that. In Pawtucket, I was in the minority, being a white woman, and over the last 10 years, all the different nationalities that moved in and lived there, it was just astounding, but they did find a source of power in certain organizations. They did, after a while, want to have a say, and they should, because they're the majority people in the city, and they should be represented on the board. And a big change has come over there over the last 10 years. So I have to call up the figures on how diverse Attleboro is, how it has been leaning in recent years, but a couple of events I went to, after living in Pawtucket, I did think, wait a minute, almost all the people in this room are white. And that doesn't really reflect what our nation is like at the moment.
Well, I mean, I found a similar, again, I've seen how Attleboro's demographics have changed, and we're becoming more diverse as a community. But again, at a lot of public events and meetings, it doesn't seem to be as diverse as the general population is.
Right.
Which is, again, why I think we need to motivate
Yes.
more people to get involved, so that you're right. Your elected officials should look and represent
Right.
more or less the constituency of the public.
Yeah.
It's again, it's nice to see new people like yourself getting involved. Are there any other activities that you've been involved with since you've moved to Attleboro?
Just the one I've been involved with for the last few decades, music. I'm a music fanatic. I play horns, and I play it. I like many different kinds of music, so I'll go anywhere from playing a horn at a all-electric blues jam with all the screaming guitars and everything. I'll get up and play a solo there. I play ukulele for softer, folky type music. So I go back and forth between those two things, and I'm always looking for musical activities I can take part in.
Well, that's good. And I think you'll find in Attleboro there are a fair number of those kind of situations, and probably a growing number of opportunities for that.
That's my big hobby, I guess.
And everybody has that one thing that they like to do, and that's good. I mean, music is a pretty diverse hobby. There's a million different ways that you can enjoy that.
There is.
Have you been? Had you thought previously, other than for running for the council, had you thought maybe before that about getting on any sort of other board or commission or anything here in Attleboro? Or hypothetically, if unfortunately you don't win in the fall, are there other boards that you might be interested in?
There are some boards I might be interested in, but I decided to go for the whole enchilada, which is not mayor. Everybody thinks, for me, I'd like to be a member of the city council. That's just where my goal is. My first goal. If I don't get it, we'll talk about other things after that.
Are there other things that you might hope to do after being a city councilor, hypothetically? Are there, some people have some ambition that they always want to accomplish in life before it's all over.
I'm at the spot where I want to be. Those are my two strongest interests. Are also my two strongest goals and life goals. I'm happy with it. Politics and music is about all I'm about.
That's good. So, as you said, you've been interested in politics for a long, long time. I'm assuming that started when you were really young, probably where you grew up. That was something that... Maybe.
I remember it strongly as when I was a reporter, that I had the tolerance and the interest to sit in meetings and absorb the whole thing. And I wasn't the go-to meeting, stay 15 minutes, and then leave type that you could do way back when. Again, this was a long time ago. And what was going on at one meeting, I'd hear a mention of something else at another meeting, and I would want to go to that one, and it's just, it's not quite a sickness, but it's a strong interest, I don't know why it's there. I remember my father making a few statements when I was little, before it was, while I was still living at home, prior to college, maybe even prior to high school. My father said, I want to serve in this town government. We lived in Rainham, Mass, and he wanted to do that, and he never did. So maybe that stuck with me somehow. I don't remember what subjects he was particularly passionate about or what interested him, but I remember him saying that, and I reflect on it later. That some people want to do that and don't try. I have tried, and I have it in me again to give it one big try. We'll see what happens.
And I think that's absolutely a great trait to have, and it's necessary. I mean, in order to be able to do a job like city council, you've got to be highly motivated, right? You've got to be willing to take that shot.
With me it's a little different. If we still have time, I'd like to explain a little bit. I've taken out papers for two positions for Ward 6, Diana Holmes, because I live in Ward 6, and for City Council at large, because the declaration period is so long. It's about 5 months. Things change. People drop in. People drop out. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know how Diana felt about running again. So I'm we call it hedging my bets. I don't know. I'm collecting signatures for both positions in November. I'm not running for January 6th. But I have a problem. I have back issues. I have degenerative disc disease. I'm sitting in a chair now, so you can't tell, but I cannot stand up straight. I have bad posture. I've kind of limited walking skills and whatever.
So you're somewhat limited
So
on
it's hard for me
door
to
to
get out.
door.
I'm not going to be doing door-to-door canvassing. It's hard for me. Oh, the most obvious thing, I'm also not a declared member of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So I'm not going to get any fundraisers or assistance from either of those two organizations in my campaign. I'm really out there by myself trying to do things, and I'm motivated. The situation is what it is. I don't blame anybody. But I do want to tell people it's hard for me to get out. I need to get more signatures. If you see me at a local event, such as the Steampunk Festival or anything else that's coming up in Attleboro, I usually have my nomination sheets with me, and I'm sitting somewhere nearby. I may have a sign up that I'm collecting signatures for city council. If you see me, please, and you're interested in town government or want to help out, just come over and sign signature for me. Some people don't know that doesn't mean you have to vote for that person. It doesn't indicate commitment to that person.
Right.
It just allows me to run. It allows me to get my name on the ballot.
Right.
And
oftentimes, as a candidate, getting signatures can be one of the most frustrating parts of the whole process.
People either know something about the process and know what you're up to, or they know nothing.
Right.
And when you're out in public and you're faced with a family with little kids doing an activity, you're not going to sit there and explain the whole thing to them, or they're going to want to listen to you do all that.
Right.
So people who know a little bit about what's going on, the 5-month declaration period may be helpful to me because I need more time to get my signatures, but it's also there isn't a time that people expect people to be out getting signatures. With the special elections, such as the one coming up in June, people might have expected that more, but when you're not running until November, they don't.
Right, you have a longer window of time.
They're not thinking of you, They may be thinking of you in October, but they're not going to be thinking of you during May, June.
And you talked about the interesting concept of not being a member of either of the two major political parties, but in some ways may make things more difficult. But I want to remind you that a recently elected mayor is not a member of either political party as well.
Yes.
So it's, and in Attleboro, we have a long history of people who are independent being elected to a variety of offices. So again, it's a little bit different than Pawtucket or some other communities.
So to be fair, she had support from the prior mayor, which is a big boost.
Yeah, it certainly helps when you have endorsements of prominent, other elected officials.
Right.
We have about a minute left here. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add before we go?
Get out the request that people see me. Please come sign my papers. That I'm a candidate who's associated with, obligated to no one. When a subject comes before me or I have to make a voting decision, I deal with, I gather information, I do my homework. I decide in my mind, based on my past experience and my principles, how I want to vote, and that's it. Right now, I don't have to worry about anything else. And that's the kind of candidate you really want up there. They'll listen to you, but they'll vote the best.
Well, I think that's what democracy is all about. Pam, I appreciate so much you being here this evening, and I greatly respect you coming out and running for public office. I know from my own personal experiences how challenging that can be. And I wish you the best of luck, and I'm sure we're going to have the opportunity to talk many times in the future. And I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in this evening to People It's Good to Know. There are so many people out there who want to volunteer and find a way in which they can help.
We've got some brilliant people that have come out of the school system here in Attleboro.
You actually perform as an elected official the way people should.
There are no agendas. Nobody has any projects that they have to complete, but we're just sharing information